In tonight's pre-election segment, we hear about question one. A yes vote would allow a second slots parlor in Massachusetts. The slots license could only be for a place of a certain size that includes horse racing, that is, something like Suffolk Downs. Our guest is calling for a no vote. 3 years ago, she also led a successful campaign against a casino in East Boston. We'd like to welcome the chair of the Committee for a Sustainable and Responsible Economic Development, or SHRED, Celeste Myers. Thank you very much for being with us, Celeste.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, what about how a slots parlor would affect that area where you live in East Boston? It's not as big a deal as a casino, so what do you see?
All of the negative impacts that we lobbied so hardly against in 2013, at the Gaming Commission in 2014, with none of the luster or shine or facade that prior incarnations of proposals in this area, offered. So more negative impact, very little benefit. And this particular developer hasn't really aligned himself to the gaming legislation. Obviously, he's trying to alter it, and he's really failed so far to show what would be beneficial to the community. So no one's on board with this.
Now, from what I read in the news, this is a person who might have some purchase and sale agreement on some property around Suffolk Downs, but even if this passes, the State Gaming Commission doesn't have to give out another license. I mean, they would be able to if they wanted to, but why would they?
Right. We've seen to date that they are still reserving right to award that third license that's already on the roster in Region C. So, in addition to just doling out licenses, they're tasked with weighing the merits of any proposal. And if a proposal that doesn't seem suitable doesn't avail itself, then they reserve the right to not give a license. So it's true. Should this initiative pass in the general election, there's nothing that says the Gaming Commission has to award a license.
You mentioned negatives associated with a slots parlor. What kind of things are you talking about?
Basic things that we've been concerned about since my initial interest way back in 2010. Peaks in crime, peaks in traffic, impacts on local businesses, just kind of choking off access to the area, and then just that unfair competitive advantage that can easily detract from businesses in that area. If you're a small mom and pop restaurant or establishment, you don't have the ability to give away a free drink where casinos and slot ventures can. You're the new sexy development in town, and you've got kind of this unfair ability to navigate laws differently. Your tax rate's different than everybody else because you've worked out an agreement with the state and the host community. It just so many things. And again, crime can't be underestimated. We've heard from Congressman Steele in Connecticut how the sleepy bedroom town of Ledyard has completely been impacted by the advent and installation of casinos in that area. We see Atlantic City, which is kind of, community ruin incarnate, and we certainly don't want that in the businesses. The back roads of a casino over in that area are our main streets, and it really has the impact to devastate the area.
We're talking with Celeste Myers from SHRED, as in vote no in question one. The kind of crime, I'm picturing some things I've seen in orbit around casinos, and where the pawn shops and I don't know, maybe some other places where people are doing some bad things.
Prostitution, drug use, people get into that Las Vegas, Atlantic City mentality sometimes, and all of the ancillary vice-related crimes seem to really spike in those areas. Not to mention drunk driving goes up dramatically in the areas immediately surrounding the casino. They have the ability to not only give out free drinks, they can give out free drinks from 8 a.m. until 2 a.m. with just a 6-hour cooling off period. Most people are typically sleeping, but if you're in a 24-hour operation, that's a lot of free beverages to be had and then navigate into the communities.
One other thing to puzzle over here is how this would work at Suffolk Downs, if that were to be the location, whether it would work in concert. I know the owners of the track, they're not publicly endorsing this, but I'm wondering, could this possibly be a way to sort of prop up racing?
What we've seen, as you mentioned, racing, in the time since the decision to dole out the license to Everett instead of Suffolk Downs or Revere, we've seen a drastic decrease in the amount of race days. They have successfully petitioned the Gaming Commission to allow for only 6 race days, when I've heard stories of up to 363 days race days a year over at Suffolk Downs in its heyday, but even more modestly, about a 130-day season seems to be palatable for folks that are in the horse racing industry. They're maintaining the 6 race days so that they can avail themselves of simulcasting licensing. And then also, as you recall in the initial legislation, there is an allowance for some money to be set aside for the purpose of horse racing. So they've positioned themselves to do as little as possible to get as much benefit as possible. I don't know that they're interested in propping up racing more than they have, but I think they're interested in reaping as many benefits as possible. Also, too, this current revision of the question that they're putting to the statewide voters is so narrowly focused that if it's successful, the only feasible option would be a site adjacent to Suffolk Downs, within 1,500 feet of Suffolk Downs.
Now, one of the reasons that this question was allowed to go on the ballot is that it concerns more than just people in East Boston. In one constituency, there are people who want to go to a slots parlor that's not too far away. So what about that need, to the extent that it's a need?
We really disputed how relevant it was to voters across the state because it is so, laser focused within 1,500 feet of an operating racetrack that is currently racing, that has previously raced, and that is not separated by roadway or rail, that only screams Suffolk Downs. And actually, it excludes Brockton. Brockton has a similar parcel, but it is separated by railway and road, so that cuts them out of the equation. So just as the legislation allows for each host community to vote on its own host community agreement, that's pretty much how we felt this should have played out. The Attorney General disagreed with us, and then again, the state Supreme Judicial Court disagreed with us, so that's why we find ourselves here.
If I rewind back 8 years, I remember during the economic downturn, those signs at one of the union halls, trade union people, they wanted to build a casino. It's jobs for people and it's growth. So what about that need?
There is so much building going on in my immediate neighborhood of East Boston and across the city of Boston. You're hard-pressed to turn a corner without bumping into a construction crane. So I'm all for development and growth and creating job opportunities, but I'm for creating a positive impact. Just before coming here today, I had the opportunity to drive through the trailer park, which is kind of the epicenter of where they propose to put the slot parlor. And when I talk to folks about the geographic location where this is, targeted for, I met with some response that say, well, yeah, it's kind of a trashy, dumpy place. Be glad to get rid of it and at least put something nice and clean up there. But as I drove through and I saw some sad little trailers with their little gardens out front, some people meandering through, some going to work, coming from work. These are people's lives. These are people's livelihoods. And, if your position is that it's a trashy place I'd rather not have in my neighborhood, why not focus energies on building something that adds value? Let's build some more habitable housing in that area. Let's meet the actual needs of people in this area instead of putting in something that's just going to ultimately have a nice facade but add to the blight of the immediate and surrounding community. Let's not forget, it's conveniently located on the MBTA. Everybody with a hope and a prayer and a quarter and a T-pass is going to be out there trying to hit it big. At the end of the day, it's going to drain the main streets, and it's not adding value. One of the big selling points was that this is going to bring economic development to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's going to bring more money in. I go back to we're the 4th largest tourist destination in the nation. More people come to Boston than Disney World. There are folks that need all kinds of opportunities, but inviting somebody from outside of the state, outside of the country, to come in and negatively impact our legislative process, undermine the work of the people who have rolled up their sleeves, contributed to fight and save their communities, was really just the wrong question, the wrong time, the wrong person, the wrong location.
We should mention that you've got a site that people can check out on the internet for this companion.
We do. It's masscasinos.net.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us. Celeste Myers from Shred, as in vote no on question 1.